Days Gone is an open-world survival game by Sony Bent, but should you part with your cash for it? Joining me to discuss that is Leon Hurley. Hello, Leon.
Hello.
Leon, you've played the game from start to finish, so you're going to fill us in on everything. Like everyone else listening to this, I haven't played it, but I've seen the trailers. I know roughly what's going on. So can you tell us, it's got Deacon, it's got zombies, he's got a bike, but what's the actual point of the game?
That's quite interesting. It's a very good game. It's great fun. There's lots of sort of nice mechanics. The zombies are interesting. They have a horde sort of mechanic, if you like, so they congregate in large groups, like hundreds, and you trigger them and they come running at you. It's very scary. Story-wise, the story doesn't really develop until quite late on. I think it was delayed by a couple of months, and I think there's been some reshuffling because it opens with no real kind of main plot, and there isn't really an obvious main plot for quite some time. There's things going on that seem like more important to do than other things, and I don't want to say too much because I don't want to give away any spoilers. There's some very obvious things that develop very quickly, like, you know, first 8-10 hours in you start to get a gist of what's going on, but it's not a game that starts with like, this is the thing you're trying to achieve. It's a case of like, this camp wants you to do a thing, this camp wants you to do something else, your friend needs that. So you're sort of doing like kind of odd jobs and bits and pieces, especially at the beginning. The longer you play, the more things kind of condense and you start to get like a main story. And I don't want to say too much about any of that because it happens quite late on. It would be spoilery to sort of say too much now.
Okay, well, speaking of time, you've said that you've played this for about 60 hours now and got to the end game. Mm-hmm. Is there a good variation of things to do in that 60 hours?
Yeah, I think so. It's a very kind of Ubisoft-styled game. I think it's quite sort of Far Cry and Assassin's Creed. You have settlements built in the world that you find, unlock. The map opens up as you progress, and you do jobs for them, find different things to do. There's like enemy camps to take down, so there's like these marauder, rippers, different factions, and you'll take down a base, usually because a settlement asks you to, but you'll find a bunker that will have a map in it that will usually unlock some crafting upgrades and an area of the map. So you travel around doing these bases. There are hordes to take on, which we can talk about a bit more later, but there's, I think, 22 hordes around the map. There's various missions to do. There are Nero checkpoints, which are like the sort of the FEMA environmental people, and they have like upgrades to Deacon that boost his health, his stamina, things like that. So there's a wide range of things to do, and the open world itself is the kind of rolling emergent thing where you decide to go somewhere, and 2 hours later, loads of things happened. You've forgotten what you were set out to do, but something's on fire, and there's screaming over there, and things happen whether you sort of set out to do specific things or not.
Okay, well, those are the humans that you'll be interacting with in the world. Obviously, you mentioned the zombie hordes a little bit there. Are they as good as we've been led to believe? I'm thinking specifically of that E3 demo that we saw. It's
interesting. They are, they're not zombies as such. They are infected by a rabies-like virus, so they're still alive, and they exist in like groups of 50, 60, 70, up to 100 more. The E3 demo is there, and it's interesting because most of the hordes exist like in a cave or by a mass grave, and you'll be wandering around and you hear screaming, and they'll come at you in a flood. And it's always like really impressive, like when you're in a town or in an area and they come flooding around the buildings and flowing over cars and wreckage. It looks incredible. And first few times it happens, you just kind of go, oh, I'm dead. And you almost like kind of freeze because you just don't know how to manage like 50 or 60 things. Later on, you get better upgrades, better guns, better sort of skills, and you start to lay down a plan. You drop mines, you have Molotovs, you have different sort of attractor, like noise distractors that explode, and you have different techniques to do it. But the E3 sort of demo, that big red sawmill where you run through flipping barriers and dropping planks and things, that's in the game, but it's clearly been sort of demoted from being like a big set. It is a set piece mission. Most of the time you'll find a cave, you'll see this sort of smear of like dirt and rubbish on the ground. It usually leads up to a cave mouth or under a bridge or something like that, and you'll know you're nearby. They generally go in during the day, come out at night, but you go up to a cave, you sort of throw a bomb in there or something, and then you'll hear a scream and all hell breaks loose.
So these aren't like hordes or collections of people that are roaming around the world in something like Alien Isolation where they just maraud about. They're in very specific areas that you have to like go and find?
They're in specific areas, but they do move around. So what usually happens is they'll sit in a cave during the day because I think they don't like the sunlight. I don't think they like it when it's too warm. So they'll stay out of the sunlight and stay in the caves during the day. At night they will come out, and there's usually a kind of a mass grave or a rubbish dump or something in the area around the cave, and they will come out and go to their feed and go back to the cave. Sometimes you'll just see them, they'll kind of just be wandering around in a horde. They interact with other elements of the wildlife as well, so like sometimes you'll be going through the world and you'll see like a herd of deer will just barrel past you fast as they can, and you're like, well, what's going on there? And you'll turn around and realise the horde are chasing you. They'll find bases, they'll find animals, they'll have fights with things. You'll hear gunfire and you'll see a marauder camp being overrun by a horde just happening by itself, and you might wait for the horde to pass and then just go and loot all the bodies.
Well, let's talk about the map a little bit then. It's obviously a huge world, but you did mention in your written review that sometimes some of the missions force you to basically travel across the entire world for not a lot of reward.
Sometimes it's early on, like as I say, I think the game's been delayed, and I think there's been a bit of like rejigging to get it out for April. So yeah, there's a few points early to mid game where sometimes you'll get a mission pop up and you go, I'll go and see what that is, and you drive across the map to wherever it is, and you go up to see someone and they'll just say like one thing or two things, and then that will be the end of that like mission. I think they've sort of split things up a bit to just make the opening a bit longer. It doesn't have, like I said, the longer you go on the better it gets and the more the story develops. One of my favourite memories really early on was getting lost with the bike, which we'll come back to. You can run out of petrol until you sort of get into the habit of like refueling and keeping track of your gas. You can run out, and I ran out of petrol in the middle of the forest, so I had to creep around the forest at night, very early game, without a lot of skills or weapons, just sort of terrified of, like, you can hear like freakers screaming in the tree line and animals making noises and things happening, and just crawled around till I found some cars, like rooted around, found a petrol can, crawled back. Thunder's cracking across the sky, it starts to rain. It's it's incredibly sort of atmospheric and really interesting, emotive kind of space to explore.
And what it sounds like to me at the moment is the game basically has two key characters. One is Deacon, the other is your bike. Now this is something you're going to spend a lot of time with, but it's very familiar in the way that you can upgrade it, you can paint it, you can do all the things to it, right?
It's interesting. It took a little while to adapt to that because obviously with Assassin's Creed and things like, you're used to having a horse, Red Dead, you whistle, the thing comes and finds you. This is the bike obviously stays where it is. You can only save next to the bike, you can only fast travel when you're next to the bike, and you can only fast travel if you have enough fuel to reach your destination. So you are tied to this bike, and very, very sort of start of the game, it takes a bit of getting used to. You'll suddenly go, why is the bike not working? Oh, I've run out of gas, I don't know where to get any. Or you'll go on a mission and you'll go through some steps, and then you'll be like, where's my bike? Oh, it's miles that way, I've got to run back to find it. You get used to that quite quickly, and you start to sort of put it into your routine of how to sort of play the game and what you need to do. You upgrade it in terms of petrol tanks. Like, that's one of the main things I kept upgrading. Is every time I could buy a better petrol tank I could, you upgrade the tyres, the pistons, the engine, cosmetic stuff. So I've got like wire grills and a big front like nose cone thing. And I'm oddly quite attached to it now. I've got it bright red. I've got sort of really cheesy flames on the petrol tank. But you are bonded to it weirdly in a way that you might not be to a horse. You like the horse because it's alive and it has a character, but the bike is far more functional and you're far more reliant on it, so you end up bonding with it more, I think. So
in summary, maybe not quite as standout as a Spider-Man or a God of War, but still good overall.
I think it's good, but it's not great. It's sort of little bits here and there are kind of, you can see where it's not as good as, say, a God of War or Spider-Man, where it's almost like flawless all the way through. This has a few little flaws here and there, but I always enjoyed it. I've got loads of really good memories of things that happened. When I finished it and the credits rolled and it was over, I wanted to go back to play more, and I think that's always a good sign of, like, having sunk 50, 60 hours into a game, immediately wanted to carry on playing it again.
So what are we giving Days Gone?
I'm going to give it a 3.5 out of 5.